Have you ever tried to be more creative? Have you ever just tried to start being creative? Maybe you're a creative person who's frustrated and feeling creative block. It can feel overwhelming, like there's a wall in front of you. And that creative block was a huge problem I faced. And the longer it went on, the worse it got, and the more I felt like I couldn't do anything or I'd lost my edge. So I went searching for answers. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing 3 of the techniques I found to help you bring on or bring back your creativity. These methods have worked for me, people I've known, and the likes of Alicia Keys, John Cleese, Questlove, Steve Jobs, and more. So here are 3 methods you can use to help trigger your creativity when you're not feeling it. Let's go. Hello there, my name is Nick Delaforce. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to this series on exploring creativity, finding inspiration, and all the ways to become more creative and feel more inspired. In short, because of that creative block I mentioned before, I'm on a mission to find new ways to unlock and explore my own creativity and to help you to do the same. I'm going to take a straightforward approach to it along the way and trying to help us all figure out easy ways of unlocking, unleashing, and exploring our creativity and finding inspiration. Because I really believe that embracing your creative side can make you and the person next to you happier and make the world a better place in doing so. Now, if you're not a traditional creative or in a traditional creative job, please don't be put off. You can be creative in so many different ways and in a job or hobby or pursuit of any kind. And people in creative jobs, kind of like me, can feel totally uncreative and uninspired, chugging along, repeating formulas, and not actually feeling creative just as much as anyone else. So regardless of if you're a lawyer or an accountant or a filmmaker or writer or painter or cleaner, you can still use what we're going to talk about today. So please do keep watching. This all started for me because I was feeling creatively blocked, uninspired, and just at a loose end. And not knowing what to do, and with tons of other things going on for me, like a child on the way, I set all of my creative stuff to one side. And I didn't realize it would compound my frustration and make it worse. So I did nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. I worked that job I didn't like, I put off my own creative work, and somehow fell out of the habit of being creative for myself. And that led to feeling depressed and frustrated. Things I thought might inspire me just stopped doing that. They almost became scary. Now, creativity and what it means is different for everyone. This video, as I mentioned, is looking at 3 ways to kickstart that creativity. But if not all of those work for you, it's because they're not necessarily meant to. Now hear me out. Everyone thinks and works and ticks slightly differently and experiences creativity in slightly different ways too. So if just one of these clicks for you, that's the goal here. So have a listen to each method and then try and pick or adapt the parts of them that sound like they fit best for you. Also, you're going to benefit from having a creative activity or a task in mind. Anything from art to a film, even a spreadsheet. Okay, let's dive in. Now, starting with possibly the most famous of the techniques we'll talk about, the artist way. It's a book and an approach to creativity written by Julia Cameron, who is herself an author and a creativity coach. The book has sold millions of copies all over the world over the last 30 years and has legions of devoted fans. And they include the likes of Alicia Keys, Pete Townsend, Patricia Cornwell, Kerry Washington, Elizabeth Gilbert, Helmut Newton, just to name a few. And to follow the artist way and do the complete program, some might say you need to buy the book and follow it religiously. And by the way, it does talk a lot about God. It's modeled on the AA 12-step recovery program, and that's important to know because it takes a 12-week approach. But many people who've tried it, many reviews you'll read, like author and podcaster and all-round lifestyle guru Tim Ferriss, have been able to shortcut this, just putting into practice 2 of the central ideas from the book. The morning pages and the artist dates. And I agree completely there. I think the morning pages is the anchoring idea of the artist way and the key to its effectiveness. So that's where I'm going to start because that is where I did start with it. This came at a tough time in my life for me when I was happy in some respects and not at all happy in others. I was an overjoyed new dad, but 2.5 years into the job I really wasn't enjoying at a company I didn't believe in, and that was really taking its toll. But so what about these morning pages then? Basically, it's the daily practice of a sort of freeform journaling system or exercise that forms the core of the technique. where every morning you create a routine or a safe time and a safe space to do this freeform writing exercise. Essentially writing a stream of consciousness, whatever springs to mind. Now, Julia Cameron suggests writing about 3 pages, and she describes it as this method for getting distracting thoughts out of the way, sort of firing up your brain. In her words,
what they are doing is they are sort of poking a little whisk broom into all the corners of your consciousness and bringing your hidden thoughts out into the open onto the page.
And really, really importantly, the morning pages are not meant to be a creative pursuit in their own right. I liken them to a sort of written meditation. They're great for surfacing ideas, but if you apply the pressure to them to be a creative product of their own, they've probably lost their purpose as a sort of pressure-free morning mental cleanse. You need to be able to let them go to a degree afterwards, basically. So, to actually do it, step 1, set a time every morning to do the freeform writing in a notebook. Just write whatever comes to mind, do a brain dump. I even started listing items around me once when I did this and I got stuck, and it did actually help. But it may manifest as feelings, ramblings, rants, so much. So just see how you go. The next step then, number 2, take 5 minutes and write down a list of the creative things you want to get done that day, and then try them out afterwards and see if your mind is kick-started by that process. Now, effectively doing this on repeat, she'll get easier and feel less resistant each time. And hopefully, because of that morning mental dump, you'll be more inspired to actually approach your creative tasks. So getting that thinking out of the way at the beginning of the day actually helps you be creative afterwards. The other part of the Artist Way combo then is the artist date, which is a simple and actually pretty powerful idea. Julia Cameron describes it like this.
Artist date is a one-time-a-week, festive, solo expedition to do something that interests you.
It could be a gallery visit, a movie, a talk. To a degree, this is actually really great, just common sense advice, I think, for everyone. Get out, go do something fun, and you might be inspired. This is something actually a lot of people I've met have really needed to hear the more I think about it. Now, obviously for this video, I've simplified that a whole lot, and there is far more to the Artist Way in the book. But I think the artist date was the part of this approach that I connect with the most. So did the Artist Way work for me? Well, yes and no. I love some of the ideas, but don't connect as much with the more spiritual side of the book. I also don't find myself inspired by daily writing exercise, so I found the morning pages really hard to stick with. And though it did work in short sporadic bursts for me, just daily writing is not my jam. The Artist Way has had praise heaped on it by legions of fans, like I said before, and I think it's well worth a shot for the right person. It's helped people I'm very, very close to and have worked with. But I think the key there is that they have had very different personalities to me, and they tend to be more drawn to either the methodical writing task or the more spiritual parts of it. I think a big part of finding a way of being creative that works for you is not forcing a square peg into a round hole. So I didn't force myself to keep doing this, as I think it's got to feel natural and comfortable too. So if writing is your thing, and you keep a diary or a journal, or you're more spiritual in general, this may really come quite naturally, and I recommend it. It also does require a bigger commitment to the process to work, and the Artist Way is the longest form of the approaches that I'm going to talk about in this video. And now for something completely different, I want to talk about the Tortoise Mind. So this is based in the idea that being overly analytical and overthinking things is not very good for your creativity, and I really, really like this one. Basically, there are a whole bunch less steps than there are to something like the Artist's Way, and because of that, it can be a little tricky for some people. But if you're like me and you've got an aversion to rules and aversion to structure, then it can be a really, really powerful way of being creative. So look, let's check it out, but first, let me tell you exactly what to do. Just kidding. So my context in discovering this technique, well, when I left that job that I told you about I didn't like, I fled across the world. There were other reasons, but with a 1-year-old in tow and in search of new adventures, my wife and I jumped on a plane and started a new life here in London. And for the first time in a very long time, I had a chance to slow down. And that's the core idea with this technique. Guy Claxton, who's a cognitive scientist, came up with this theory that the brain works at 2 speeds, harebrained and Tortoise Mind, each of which is a sort of evolutionary speed, like a gear in a car, that helps the brain perform specific tasks. And the issue then with all that is that we're effectively encouraged and programmed from a pretty young age to be stuck in just one of those gears, the Hare brain. Hare brain is the highly analytical mode that naturally forces us to be less creative because it's for processing information and getting things done quickly and effectively, basically productivity mode. So then creativity mode is Tortoise Mind. It's the free-flowing state Julia Cameron was probably trying to unlock with the morning pages. It's a slowed down, less structured way of thinking in which you naturally tend to be more creative because your brain's more open to making random connections. Not so much processing, but free associating. Every time you have an idea come to you in the shower or stare out the window on your daily commute and have an epiphany, that is an inadvertent moment of Tortoise Mind kicking in.
If I sat late at night and I was trying to write a sketch and I wanted to conclude the sketch or something like that, I could really sit there hammering away at my brains and nothing would come. And yet in the morning when I got up, made myself a cup of coffee and sat down for 5 minutes, suddenly the solution was there.
So how do you become more of a tortoise? Well, you're going to hate me here, but by slowing down. For me, meditation has worked really well, and another thing that's worked for me and many others is just getting outside and doing something absolutely different. Now, whether you love him or hate him, Steve Jobs was a huge proponent of this, arguably very successful too, and he was famous for his walks and his walking meetings when he needed to brainstorm. So Johnny Ive, Apple's ex-head of design now, has spoken about he and Jobs just going for walks, barely talking, to help themselves creatively solve problems and come up with new ideas. It seems that in many cases the act of walking becomes this sort of meditative thing in its own right, or a mental reset or a cleanse in the same way that morning pages are for followers of the artist's way. So what can you actually do to get into this Tortoise Mind state? Well, it boils down to making a change of pace happen, and also to stop trying to focus too hard on your creative problem. So step one then is to actually prime yourself, starting with the Hare brain by immersing yourself in concepts or ideas or problems with all of the research and preparation that you can. Step two then is letting it all go and letting the Hare brain, analytical mind disengage completely and let your tortoise take over and trusting that it's going to be able to do its thing. And this can be scary, particularly for people who are doing this for paid work. But this is where the magic happens. To let the tortoise mind do its thing, people will walk, meditate, listen to music, sleep, connect with nature. But the most common thread for people this works for, and that's me included, is that they seem to isolate themselves from others and do something physical that allows them to get their tortoise mind going and just let it wander and free associate. So it may require some patience at first. And a pro tip, try and have a notebook or pen and paper or your notes app handy to record the revelations that you have. So for me, when I started reading about this idea, I'd been truly lost for quite some time. It was year 2 into my creative escape and still a very happy dad and husband, but still not as close as I'd hoped to feeling creatively fulfilled. Even in a much more creative job that I was actually enjoying, I found that I needed to completely disconnect from not just work and not just responsibility and all that stuff, but actually the almost obsessive consumption of books and videos and YouTube and documentaries about creativity and movie screens and social media and all that stuff too. And that's so that I could completely engage my tortoise brain and process everything in a very real way. My desire to cram some sort of productive moment into every spare second I had was actually suppressing my tortoise. So slowing down, in my experience, really did help my mind wander and for a sense of feeling creative to start coming back again. It can feel a bit like a lightning strike flash of creative impulse and inspiration when this happens, but knowing where those are coming from and how this works, you can prime yourself and you can make it happen and harness it as much as possible. For me, I suddenly felt more like myself again. I could understand ideas quicker, I could come up with more innovative ways of solving problems, I could give creative advice at work I was actually proud of again. And most importantly, I reconnected with my own creativity. I started becoming inspired by all the things I was inspired by before, photography and film. I got excited about using cameras again. Movies inspired me. Look, this isn't for everybody, and some of you are probably asking, what technique? And I'm sure some of you will just connect with it, just like I did too. Okay, so I hope exploring the path of Tortoise Mind has been as interesting and helpful for you as it has been for me. But before we head down the next one over here, I wanted to have a little discussion about the next topic and the connotations it might have. So I want to make it really clear, straight up, I do not believe that anyone should ever copy other people's work and try and pass it off as their own. So with that out of the way, let's talk all about number 3, standing on the shoulders of giants. This, I think, can be the easiest shortcut to creativity, but also the most controversial when it goes wrong too. It's also the least structured of the 3 approaches we're looking at least in how I see it anyway. Questlove of The Roots, award-winning musician and director and acclaimed author too, talks about reduce, reuse, recycle in his book Creative Quest. John Cleese again suggests in his book called Creativity that you borrow an idea from somebody you admire and start working on it until it becomes your own.
I suggest at the start that you steal or borrow, or as the artists would say, are influenced by.
And that part is important. You do need to make it your own before you put it out there. Like I'm doing with this video, I guess. I'm not the first and won't be the last to make a comment on creativity. I've just quoted 2 other people right there. But hopefully I can add a little bit of my own ideas, my perspective, my experiences, and my sort of own flavor to it too. So as far back as there have been people creating things, and really tasks of any kind, there have been people recombining ideas they've taken from other places into new original ideas of their own. Whether that's works of art, business models, written word, films, songs, accounting practices, interpretation of the law even, and so much more when you think about it. In the creative world, artists have been known to make direct copies of other people's work for themselves as a creative exercise. In acting and film schools, students are often encouraged to recreate scenes from films, and reinterpretation of plays in the theatre or on screen is how we can have totally unique, different feeling versions of a play like Romeo and Juliet, but using exactly the same script. Painters paint copies of famous works as exercises, and sometimes writers will even retype manuscripts in their entirety. These can often then lead to entirely new ideas in themselves too. So, Point Break and Fast and the Furious, anyone? So, how do you take ideas that you like and make them your own? And without being accused of plagiarism? Well, to be brutally honest, you can't be sure you won't ever get accused of stealing an idea. But what you can do is make sure that you don't ever put out work that is a direct copy of somebody else's and try and pass it off as your own. Sure, start with an idea that you found in somebody else's work, but go and make it your own. So my final example here is a big film fan and an even bigger filmmaker, Quentin Tarantino. And he's very honest about what inspires him, and I think he's a great example of how this technique plays out really well. His films are undoubtedly influenced by his heroes, and he'll gleefully tell you exactly what he borrowed. But his films are also unquestionably original and awesome too. He takes basic ideas and makes them his own, and he often throws in a bit of a loving tribute too. So, if you're not an artist, musician, filmmaker, or creator of any kind, how does this actually apply to you? Well, if you're in the world of business, for example, you're actually in a great position to use this method, because unless you copy a close colleague's actual work and pass it off as your own, strategy in business is almost mostly repeatable and really fair game. Look at famous business people and how they've dealt with situations in their careers, or talk to more experienced colleagues about how they've dealt with challenges. Perhaps you can even recreate it. I imagine a scientist can look at how other scientists have solved unique problems across different disciplines and see if the application of that thinking or even the methodology works in their field too. There are huge amounts of opportunities to be incredibly creative. But the basic underlying idea here is to take something that you love or that just works and explore how you can either offer up your own point of view on it, perhaps by borrowing a technique or a theme or adding your own voice and style to that, making sure that you make it your own. And have I said that enough? Making sure you make it your own? You can also use recreation of other people's works though, as a sort of practical study in how to do things. And that process in itself will often lead to new creative ways of doing things too. Don't be afraid to openly credit your inspiration. Be like Tarantino and be honest about it. It doesn't make you any less creative or original, and it probably does make you a whole lot more credible to be upfront about what inspired you. Through following the wisdom from these techniques, I did actually start feeling happier and more creative. And I think I'll keep wandering around outdoors too. I really do like that bit. Now, I think especially the first two techniques, there is a little bit of overlap in the way that they work. And I guess that must be because of the way the brain works. It must be somewhat consistent, even if the ways we trick it into working can be hugely different based on who we are and our individual personalities. I do think though that even though following the artist's way strictly was not for me, you can actually be creative in applying the technique in different ways. And I think I've found the sort of hybrid technique that works for me, creating space for the tortoise mind to come out using aspects of the artist's way. I've interpreted it and personalized it, basically, taking the freeform creation from morning pages and applying that to multiple formats, the pen, the camera, audio recordings, whatever grabs me at the time. Now, I do see the appeal of grabbing a notebook every day as a routine though. I think that can be very focusing and very simple. Personally then, I combine that getting out we talked about with the tortoise mind, with a creative pursuit or an artist's day. And maybe that, combined with my do anything approach in place of something like morning pages, is a fourth technique in itself. Or maybe I'm giving myself way too much credit there. I've found that when I've just done something, I've often had knock-on ideas as a result, or even very occasionally just really like what I've created. But I do try and apply Julia Cameron's advice for the morning pages to these exercises and try to add no pressure, and for the most part, don't use the results of these as finished products. Though sometimes these sneak into videos as cutaways maybe. But there is something truly freeing about having no pressure on it that helps the brain slow down to its tortoise mind pace. Now, I definitely find inspiration in other people's work too. I'll go out and try to recreate shots I've seen, and in writing in the past, I've tried to recreate the styles of authors or script writers I've loved. They've often led to something of my own, or an idea I was actually pretty proud of. So there are just 3 ways to start the creative process, and my bonus hybrid of them there at the end too. You know, I actually didn't even realize I was doing that until I started making this video. Wow, what a voyage of self-discovery. Now, in doing all the reading about creativity, scouring the internet for easy ways to be creative, seeing the advice other people gave, and how none of it landed for me exactly, and seeing in my day job how many people want to be more creative, but don't always feel like they can be, I not only found some techniques that worked, but a bit of a passion and a calling too, exploring and inspiring creativity. And so this channel was actually born from that idea. It came to me while I was wandering in a park in North London with my camera, shooting anything around me at all and feeling pretty blocked. And guess what I'd been doing right before that? I'd been reading everything I could about creativity, and that had made me feel even more lost and frustrated at the time. But looking back on it, it's probably because I was in harebrained mode while I was reading, and then the tortoise brain kicked in while I was wandering around with my camera. So I really hope you found this video interesting and enjoyable, and please do click the thumbs up if it helped you or you liked it. I really hope you try at least one of these if you're feeling stuck as well, and I would love to hear below in the comments if any of what I've shown today has worked for you. You can also check out some links below to some more of the information that I shared and the books I spoke about too. A last thought then. These are certainly not the only approaches to being creative, and I'm already out there talking to people about what has worked for them and exploring in places you may not have thought there was a lesson to be learned about creativity. I cannot wait to share those with you too, so please do subscribe to hear more about inspiration, creativity, and just come and explore with me. So until next time, take care, and I hope to see you in the next video.